This week on The Futurists, Mike Pell.
AI is like an exoskeleton of superpowers, right? It's like putting on an Iron Man suit, and all of a sudden you have all these things that you never had the capability for. And people do exactly what you were saying. They're doing things that they literally would have never been able to do in their lifetime because they just don't have enough time. They don't have the skill, and now they're able to do them.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tursick, and my co-host Brett King is with me today. Hey, Brett. Hi, man. How you doing?
I am almost recovered.
Almost
from
recovered.
the event. Yeah,
and I can see you're back at the mothership.
I'm back in Bangkok.
Right?
Yeah, I just got back. I got back last night. It's so nice to be home after 6 weeks on the road. But yeah, I got the flu after the event, and then ended up with bronchitis. So it was a long road to recovery. But I think just because I was just so worn out with the summit, but it went off a treat as we talked about on the show the other week, so very happy with the results. But, it took a fair bit of effort, bro.
You were burning the candle, my friend. But that's quite an achievement. Just the sheer force of will to bring all those people together to one place around the world. And it was remarkable. And
I was at another event, just 2 days ago in Dubai with MasterCard Edge, and they were still talking about it. So,
great.
Achievement unlocked.
Yeah, that was great fun. We'll do it again soon. So, one of the things that we try to do on the show is bring together people who are multidisciplinary, people who've got the vision to think around a problem by drawing on multiple resources and multiple perspectives. And this week, I'm thrilled to bring in someone who's highly recommended, so highly recommended that this week I was mentioning it during LA Tech Week, that I was going to talk to him. And a whole bunch of people were like, oh, he's awesome. You're going to love this conversation. So it's a great big welcome here to Mike Pell. Mike is the director of the Microsoft Garage. He's an innovator. He's an entrepreneur. He's an author. He's got a new book out right now. And he's also been a software engineer and a computer scientist for many years, including some amazing achievements, which we'll probably get into on the show. Hey, Mike, welcome to the show. Welcome to The Futurists.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. By the way, you left out artist. I started out my career as an artist and a designer, so I love that part of what I do. But thank you for joining me.
I kind of picked that up reading your bio, though it wasn't present in your LinkedIn. Should be. It's that your work seems to kind of vacillate between design and engineering. You go back and forth, or the two things inform each other. And so we can certainly talk a bit about that, because one thing our audience loves to do is understand what is it that you do to invent the future, and then how do you do that?
Yeah, what's the process?
I would say first, I'd like to think that I do both of them all the time at the same time, because to me, they're completely linked. I don't think anybody can think about the creative things that we do without, thinking about the engineering part, or vice versa. You have some technology or something very, very interesting you see on, just on the future. You have to be a bit creative in figuring out how you can make it real.
That's kind of the essence of a designer, right? The design practice. I think for lay people, when they think about design, they think about somebody who does graphics, or somebody who might design a poster or something. That's a part of it, but that's graphic design. Real design thinking is breaking down a problem into its constituent parts, and then taking almost an architectural approach to designing solutions that might address that, and then assembling them. And you could follow that all the way through with implementation. Is that kind of what you do at the garage?
Not at all. I sort of have thrown design thinking out a long time ago. I did practice something I call fast design, which is helping people go from an idea to making something real very, very quickly, whether that's a working prototype, a scenario, a narrative. I mean, anything that you could just show it to someone else, which really is the heart of everything that we do. We try to take people's passion and turn that into something that we can move forward very, very quickly.
Tell me about the Garage. What is the Microsoft Garage for people who don't know about it?
Sure. The Microsoft Garage is our worldwide innovation program, mainly for employees, again, to take their ideas, the things that they maybe don't get to work on during the day, and try to make them real as quickly as they can so that they can see if there's something there. The Garage has 15 locations around the world, but it's really more of a program, meaning it's set up to help people wherever they are, to sort of find other people, like-minded, find experts around the world to help them with their different projects. We run the world's biggest hackathon. We just got done with that a few weeks ago. We had over 74,000 Microsoft employees worldwide join us over a few days. creating, over 10,000 projects, which is crazy. But it's so much fun to see the ideas that people come up with because they really span, everything from sustainability, energy, technologies, social good, every different facet that you can imagine are done every single year.
Now, there was a time, we don't hear about this much anymore, but there was a time at Google when they offered the engineering team the opportunity to spend some 10 or 20% of their time pursuing a project of their passion. I see we don't hear about that much anymore because we don't. I mean, it used to be a big story, but it seems like it's faded away. Is that similar in concept or philosophy to what you're doing at the garage?
Not at all. For
Oh,
Microsoft, it's okay. So it's a great idea. Like, hey, we're going to give you 1 day a week to do whatever you want. Go knock yourself out. Go change the world.
it
That's
works
great.
if your company is printing buckets of dollars.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a great idea if you can do that. But what we found, so that the garage program has been going for over 10 years. What we found is that that's just never going to work at Microsoft. It's innovation has got to be in the water, meaning it has to be something we just do every day because everybody's just too busy. We try to schedule no meeting Fridays, and good luck with that. Right. It's just never going to work for us. So the garage has tried to help change the culture of Microsoft to be more curious and more experimental every day, not just 1 day a week or once a year.
And is it right down the hall? Is it something like you can just wander in if you're a Microsoft employee and check it out?
Yeah, if you're in one of the 15 locations around the world, yeah, you can just cruise in. We do lots of different types of programming. In New York City, where I am, I do lots of events with our customers. So that's a lot of fun to sort of challenge their thinking. I like to say my job as an envisioneer is to disrupt the thinking of the world's most successful companies every day.
And is Copilot now playing a big role in this type of prototyping you're talking about and so forth?
Absolutely, Brett. You hit it right on the head. So we all know innovation and prototyping, and whatever. We have done it the same way forever. You envision something, you ideate on it, you hack something together, you show it to people. You get some feedback, you figure out whether you want to go forward or not. It's not rocket science. But the thing that has been a game changer is using things like Microsoft Copilot, our AI system, to be able to speed up certain parts of that innovation cycle. It can't do everything for you, but it can certainly help you speed up ideation. It can help you think in ways that you probably are never going to get to just because you don't think that way. Do instant market research, figure out the competitive strategy, look at, all the different risks of taking something to market. So the amount of time savings we're getting out of using an AI assistant in the innovation process is staggering.
I mean, I've been, we used it fairly frequently in the lead up to the summit, but I've got a couple of startups right now and producing business plans and, even just getting accounts done, and things like this, the uses for these AI tool set now is just increasing rapidly. It's like, it's funny because about a year ago, someone might be using ChatGPT and you start talking about technology and employment and they're like, ChatGPT or Copilot is never going to take my job. But if you've been watching it just the last year or two, and you see the magnitude of the change and the way that people who are using it every day can just use it for more stuff now, then, you can see that path. It's one of those things that's like, what I think one of the things that we realized doing this podcast, doing the Futurists, is there is a fairly clear line of demarcation of people who can think exponentially about the future versus those that can't sort of extrapolate, and it's, I think a lot of where people who are experimenting with AI and stuff like that, I think a lot of them fall into that category of those who can extrapolate and sort of see the future, and that's why they want to figure this stuff out. But anyway, I've gone on a tangent.
No. I mean, it's a great accelerator. I always like to say that AI is like an exoskeleton of superpowers, right? It's like putting on an Iron Man suit, and all of a sudden you have all these things that you never had the capability for. And people do exactly what you were saying. They're doing things that they literally would have never been able to do in their lifetime because they just don't have enough time. They don't have the skill. And now they're able to do them and have amazing results. So it's a pretty fun time to see, how all these people are growing and learning and experimenting.
One of the interesting things about AI to me is it makes you very self-aware. It makes you self-aware about your business process. So, if you're going to be using a Copilot or any other kind of chat assistant, you have to think carefully about how to give it instructions. It's a little bit like talking to a real assistant. You have to kind of break down the problem into something that can be solved. And so that's the first part, is you have to think about your own process and then communicate it in a way where, something else, another person, or in this case, an AI, can understand what you're telling it to do. And then you kind of have to evaluate the results. And candidly, I think most people, the first few times you try this, it doesn't really bring you the results you're looking for. So then you kind of have to play a guessing game of figuring out, like, how can I instruct this thing? And soon enough, you do. Everybody finds their own path if you pursue it long enough. It is incredibly versatile. But I think what's interesting about it is you begin to realize that you spend half your day in a trance. Half your day, you're just in reaction mode, dealing with incoming stuff in your inbox or text message or, something on Slack or whatever, where you're responding to requests for stuff. And you're kind of, but you're almost like an automaton yourself, in the sense that you're just dealing with these, this stimuli, and you're responding to them. And then when you have an AI assistant at your disposal, you kind of snap out of that trance, because you have to like kind of process the request and hand it off to somebody else. So, you turn it into a switchboard. I can't wait to have an agent that just reroutes all that stuff to my AI agent, so that
Jamie Dimon had a really good quote on it. I don't know if you saw, but he's like, we're going to be using robots to do what humans are doing today that makes them feel like robots, or something like.
Yeah, that makes a good deal of sense. I mean, if it can be, if it's repetitive and predictable, it definitely could be automated. But if you step up one level from that, what's useful about that process, and what I think everybody needs to go through it personally, is if you're trying to apply AI at scale in a business, now you have to be able to think about that whole business process that isn't always documented. Sometimes it's, just people with informal relationships in the company that, communicate to each other or send memos or whatever, however they communicate. You have to begin to observe that, deconstruct that process, and then replace it with AI at the middle. This is a super interesting puzzle, but I would say most American companies that I'm familiar with so far are stuck somewhere in that, but like they haven't gotten through. And many of them are coming back saying, we can't get the results that we want. They're finding that it's a bigger effort. I'm rattling away.
There was a really interesting, it's quite applicable, but there was a really interesting study that just came out from Harvard, at the end of September, which was showing that by analyzing LinkedIn search results or LinkedIn job placements, that they were seeing a big restructuring into their teams were being done. So, you have a senior person normally be tagged against the 3 junior people, and you're seeing a lot more of the job request now for a senior person using AI instead of using the 3 junior people. So, like we are seeing a reshaping of the job market around this. And, it's like, we've debated this on the show many times, Rob, but I think it's moving so quickly now, but it's not necessarily where we don't have the data of how it's reshaping things. But my guess is it's going to be more impactful in the short term than we might have thought.
It's already happened. And everything you just talked about, I witness every day. I have these conversations with the world's top companies. There is an unfortunate sort of an idling happening right now by companies not wanting to hire, because they're trying to figure out, can they get by with the people they have augmented by AI? Can they hire less people? Can they get rid of some people because this AI thing sounds really promising? And it's causing an unfortunate situation where new grads are having a hard time getting jobs. We're super smart, very capable of doing things much better than some existing employees, but not being given a chance because there's a narrative that you just talked about where, well, maybe a senior person, powered by AI can do better than bringing on, 3 new college hires. And I don't know about that.
This is all part of it. I think it's all part of it. And there's going to be very strong incentives, at a market level to sort of aggressively try to dehumanize corporations, because, if even if we hear Sam talk about a single person unicorn and stuff like that, there is a general acceptance that the intent of AI is to lower human capital and in doing so make corporations more profitable. But that's part of the problem, right? It's
yeah,
bad
but let's
incentives.
fast forward a little bit with what you were just talking about. It is clear from everything that I see and I do every day that people will need to learn, at the very least, how to work with an AI assistant.
Yeah.
Many people will need to learn how to manage a set of agents. Software that are off doing very particular discrete tasks or long, very long ranging things. But that is going to be part of everybody's job going forward. And it's not if this is going to happen, actually, we're just about to get to that part of the movie, right, where we all have to figure this out. It's not that agents can do everything. It's not that AI assistants can do everything, but they can do some things really, really well. And that's the part that's going to differentiate people. The people who get to stay are going to be the people who figure this out, learn how to make their own agents, learn how to get them to do things that they were, previously not able to do or just took a long time. And that is, you're right, that is reshaping, how teams feel and how organizations feel. But managing a team of agents will certainly be something that's a requirement in the future.
I really found, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Yuval Noah Harari gave a WSJ lecture recently, and he talked about why it's different, this two with AI. And he said, compared with software organization and other stuff, because he kept coming back to AI has agents. AI is this technology we can set to a task and evolve and do it by itself without human interaction, and that's fundamentally different. Except
for vibe coding, by the way, which it's like dealing with an intern that you have to keep correcting over and over again.
I'm glad you brought it up. It's coming back as a real issue right now. We finally entered the age of agentic AI. It's been, foretold for years, but here we are. We finally have them. I'm going to use ChatGPT as the example here because I'm more familiar with GPT-5 than I am with other products.
Mm-hmm.
The feedback I'm getting consistently across industries is, it's like having a clever assistant that you can't entirely trust. In other words, you give the assistant a task. Hey, I need you to research this industry and put together a PowerPoint pitch for an investor so that we can build such a business. And it will do that. It'll research the industry. It'll come back with a very nicely formatted PowerPoint that has all sorts of economic assumptions. And now you, as the manager, have this new task. You have to do the forensic work to figure out whether or not it's right. And if it got it wrong, you have to unpack where it got wrong. It doesn't show you its work. It doesn't tell you how it arrived at its conclusion. It can't. So this is a real challenge.
It can in some cases, and not all cases, but in some cases it can. But you're right, and so I work with a lot of university students as well, and this is the new job skill for them. Is since they are able to generate things very quickly, the new skill is being able to review and edit and debate and understand if something is actually good enough to present. Can they explain it orally, like in words, rather than just relying on something that comes out of the computer? That's a really important lost skill that we need to get back.
I was at dinner last night with an English professor. You can imagine this is like an existential challenge for an English professor. First of all, no college students in the United States are writing essays. I mean, everyone is using ChatGPT or something similar to generate their essays. They're not even reading the essays they hand in. So, sometimes the essay will still have a phrase that says like, I'm just a large language model. That's like in the paper.
And you've seen the videos about the watermarking, right? That's appearing in ChatGPT, like in Marvel. So
her concern is that the students that are being formed right now at university level who rely heavily on LLMs to finish their work are not developing a critical skill, which is the ability to formulate thoughts in a written process. And this is a skill that we've had now for hundreds of years, right? So it's something that culturally has been a part of the mainstream. It's kind of a hallmark of education, is the ability to articulate concepts and formulate arguments. And that's a key point here, is that it's very difficult to formulate a logical argument in sequence if you can't write it down. If you don't have the ability to write your own papers and construct your own argument, you're probably going to be unable to articulate a persuasive case. And we noted that simultaneously there's a rise in highly emotional communication. And that has something to do, I think, with the way social media is veering towards video. Video, by its nature, is not capable of delivering a complex argument. Video tends to be very superficial. You look at, say, the text talk track of a voiceover from a documentary. It's not very deep. It's not very, the depth comes in the visual, the spectacle. But as a result, if you watch a lot of video, you begin to get accustomed to that style of communication, which is much more emotional. It's much more graphic. It's much more visual. But it's not so persuasive in the sense that it doesn't use logic and reason to persuade. It uses emotion to persuade. And I think we're starting to see that refracted in our politics as well in the United States right now. Now I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Take the bait, respond.
Well, so the first thing I'll say is I completely agree that we need to bring the humanities back into the core of education, meaning critical thinking, the ability to communicate well, to formulate, to think on your feet, to debate, to be able to be, as you talked about, that person who can, at a moment's notice, be able to understand, synthesize, create a narrative, on the spot. That's a difficult thing to find. I see these days, with new grads and even in the workforce. So yes, we need to get back to that. As far as persuasion and visuals, I guess certainly we are a video culture now. We're instant gratification, 3 seconds of attention. Yes, got it. But I've, and the reason that I write the books that I write is that I see something a bit different on the horizon, which is that mechanism can also be used for good, hopefully, to be able to persuade in a very, I'll say, deep way, by using logic and reasoning, but not just in your mind, being able to see it and to actually feel how things are working in a certain way.
I'm glad you raised that. This is a really important point for the folks who are listening to understand how Mike Pell works. It's this invitation to visualize that I think is a through line in all the work that you do, not just at the garage, but also in the books that you write. The books are an invitation. It's like you kind of formulated this thesis, but you want to invite your reader to come in and share it with you. And you're trying to convey that. And it is a visual process. Tell us a little bit about the newest book, Visualizing Business.
Yeah, for many years, over 20 years, I've had a very clear vision for how business should be communicated. And so, it just turns out that now is the perfect storm. We have, the incredible visual libraries. Now we have engines to be able to do things in real time. We have all the data we could possibly ever want to make arguments. We have, AI that's been sort of mainstreamed, right? So people are not afraid of it. It's actually become relatively affordable to build things out of AI and machine learning and data. So you sort of combine all those things together, and that gives you the ability to now be able to visualize how systems and processes and markets and things actually work. And at the heart of all of my visualization work is the idea that we can surface the invisible elements of business now in a way that we never could before. So we all know how, business models work and supply chains and, sales process. It's just something that we inherently understand about our businesses, but there's no way to see them. And there's no way to see them in action. There's no way to be able to stop and play what if or to simulate how things may turn out. And so that's what I wrote Visualizing Business about, is basically to lay out how this is going to unfold in the future. All 3 of my books were written from the future. And so Visualizing Business, as it turns out, is the closest to reality now because everything has just happened in a way that makes it possible.
That's cool. Now, is the book out? Has it come out yet?
Yeah, it's been out for a bit. So you can go to visualizingbusiness.com or go to Amazon, wherever you buy books. But it was a lot of fun to write because it was one of those things that I've been working on. And it's, I had lots of examples of how this is going to play out. And so just sharing that vision with people was a lot of fun for me.
I imagine in your line of work, you're seeing examples walk through the door every day. They're like, ooh, that would be a good one for a book, and jot it down and keep
that's funny you say that because I have so many of my own ideas. I don't need other ones. I'm never going to end up with all the ones I should be writing about.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, we like to do a thing on the show from time to time where we want our audience to get a chance to understand where you're coming from and the kind of things that formed you, got you excited about the future. And so to do that, we have a special torture that we administer to our guests. It's called the lightning round. It's a series of
more painful than it really is. But...
So, Brett was going to administer this. He's going to ask you a series of short questions and just give us the first answer that comes back.
Okay.
Yep. So this is the lightning round. So, Mike, what technology do you think has most changed humanity?
Television.
Interesting. Name a futurist.
Not better. No, actually, I love television, but okay.
All right. So name a futurist or entrepreneur that has influenced you and why.
I'm probably here because of Steve Jobs. I had the very good fortune of meeting Steve Jobs in person a few times when we were inventing Acrobat and PDF because he would come to Adobe. But Steve was he was such a personality. Back in the late '70s, early '80s, when I would go to Macworlds and see him present all his things on stage, he would not just paint a vision. He would show up with the goods, right? He would pull the iPad out of his pocket. He would show people, that future that he was talking about. And I found that so incredibly inspiring. And also, frankly, I love that he led with vision. I'm a person with a lot of vision. Steve did not do, market research. He didn't do focus groups. He led with what he knew people needed and wanted. And I just love that about him.
Yeah, his design intent was the clear differentiator. What is the best technology prediction or forecast you've seen an entrepreneur or a futurist make?
Well, I think it's hard to argue with what Ray Kurzweil has put together, over the last several decades. I mean, Ray's not very often wrong. You can agree or disagree with some of his future predictions, but the guy's got an amazing track record. And so I would very carefully study what Ray's been talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I remember talking about this maybe 15 years ago about his prediction for longevity escape velocity. And now, it's looking pretty well. All right. Last one. Is there a science fiction story that's most representative of the future you expect or hope for?
I'm going to answer that two ways. The optimist in me loves the notion of Star Trek, right? That we, have conquered many things and we're off exploring, the universe. That's a great vision. And that's always been very inspiring to me. But I was also very inspired by Blade Runner, because I'm a very visual person, but it was such an interesting vision of the future. I hope that we don't head for such a dystopian future, but it was very, it sort of really got you, the first.
Which one, the Ridley Scott one or the Denis Villeneuve?
The original, yeah, the original one.
Right. It was really interesting. We had Kevin J. Anderson at the Futurist Summit talking about that, about how it was 2019, which the original Blade Runner was set in, and it was a world where we already were anticipating that androids, human-like androids, were so old at that point they were running out of their lifespan. So, he was talking about the problem with forecasting. That's great. Hey, let's go to a quick break. And you're listening to The Futurists, where we have Mike Pell as our guest this week. We'll be right back after this break.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, and Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tursik with Brett King. This week we're talking to Mike Pell from Microsoft Garage. Now, Mike, before the break, we were talking about visualization and we're talking about imagination and the kind of like oscillation between design approaches and engineering approaches. One of the things you think about and work on is dimensional presentations of information as you visualize things. And you're not limited to 3D. You have a concept of 4D. Tell me what you have in mind there.
Sure. For the longest time, we have ignored the element of time in how we communicate in business. And time underlies every single thing that we do in business, clearly. There's what's come before, there's what's about to come next. Yet we don't represent that in any of the things we do. And so when I talk about 4D, the fourth dimension for me is time. And so I've designed and engineered a whole bunch of things that really rely on time. So I've invented what I call a time machine for business. that I describe in my Visualizing Business book, where you're able to rewind through existing information and data, and also fast forward, doing forecasting and projection, doing types of different simulations.
Great forecasting.
So for me, this is completely obvious, and it boggles me that we have ignored time, with the exception of 3D animation, or video editing software, where and music, you have to deal with the element of time in all three of those, but yet in normal business applications, you never see it.
It's funny. A few years ago, I was working with Unity, the company that makes the 3D game engine. And I was talking to their AI department, and the head of AI was saying to me, Brown, he said, the reason you're having trouble understanding the concepts I'm sharing with you, which happens often for me, he said, the reason you're having a hard time understanding that is you're thinking of us as a 3D company. And I said, well, that's what you do. You develop a 3D game engine. He said, no, we're a 4D company. And I'm like, 4D, give me a break. What's the fourth dimension? Time? He said, as a matter of fact, it is. I said, okay, explain. I need to understand. And he said, look, when we train robot vehicles, they're building a 3D model. They're building a three-dimensional model. They're gathering data at the millimeter scale. It's very precise. As they drive around the city, they're constructing a map of the city. That's a 3D representation. I said, okay, fine. So where's the time element? He said, well, if you're driving cars around the city, they can only drive so many miles in 24 hours. But we could train that same intelligence on the model, and we can accelerate time. And so we can do 1 million times more scenario planning in the same space of time. And I was like, okay, you made your point. I get it. Like, you can actually collapse time down. Now, that might not be something humans can endure, but machines absolutely can. And so for training autonomous systems, that's a gigantic unlock.
Well, this is the same with Isaac, NVIDIA's robotic simulation world, right? They're able to do all of these millions of cycles of training and put robots in these simulated environments. It's it's an interesting way to think about the whole digital twin problem.
I think it's going to end up becoming a forecasting tool if it hasn't already. I mean, I think in the very narrow cases, it can be when you can control all the variables. But I think broadly, if you can start to build larger and larger simulations of the economy, the one I'm most interested in and talk about a lot on this show is the supply chain, because it's the most complicated thing humans have ever built. There's more than 1 million companies involved, and some 6 out of 10 jobs touch the supply chain. So lots of people working on the supply chain. If there were a way to visualize that, and then accelerate it in time, which we described, then you could start to do scenario planning, and you could start to envision what might happen when there's a weather event or a conflict or a war or something else. You can envision those scenarios and see what some of the secondary and third tier consequences might be. And to me, again, that's a great game. Like, that would be a huge benefit for business. I mean, imagine there's $40 trillion of business activity connected to the supply chain. So even a few percentage points of the efficiency gain are going to really unlock a tremendous amount of value for companies. So that would pay for that kind of a simulation many times over.
Absolutely. And that I talk about that quite a bit in Visualizing Business, that exact scenario. And,
very cool.
Because we have the technology, we have the understanding, we know how to do this. So it boggles me that we're not doing it yet.
Yeah, me too. I'm a little surprised by that. Now, when I was working in digital twins, I would work with the cities. Now, municipal governments famously are broke. They don't have extra money. Like, all the money they have, they're spending fixing potholes or repairing water systems or something. And so, it's going to good places, but there's just never enough to go around. And so to find even a couple $1 million to build a simulation or a 3D digital twin, that was a stretch. They had to find a way to do it. And we explored the idea of public-private partnership. That's inevitably where you would go with that. But what's your perception there for business? Because it does seem to me that manufacturers, certainly auto manufacturers, have adopted this with some gusto. I think every auto plant now in the world has a digital twin of some sort. They may not all be 3D, but they are all tracking data, and they're able to do a simulation to represent what's happening inside the plant.
Yeah, when I explain the opportunities with AI to companies who come into the garage, or I'm just chatting with people that I meet, I talk about two different parts. There's the operational efficiency part of AI and machine learning, the stuff that we're very good at doing. And then there's the growth part. What you're talking about with simulation is really first on the operational efficiency side of things. You're right. We can save an incredible amount of money and time and find all the bottlenecks and figure out what's going to go wrong. But the growth side is often ignored. And this is what I try to point out to people. If you spend all of your time looking at the operational efficiency side, you'll miss the most important part, and you'll be out of business. And history is littered with the companies that didn't pay attention to the growth side. So what you're talking about using digital twins, machine learning, AI, to look at the operational efficiency will lead to, as you said, to forecasting, simulation, and being able to predict to some degree the outcomes of who knows how many what if scenarios that can be played. That's the growth part of this.
What are the levers for hyperscaling?
That is a really interesting point. So, for instance, you could say most cities today are covered with surveillance cameras. There used to be a time 20 years ago when they said London was the most surveilled city in the world because it had all the CCTV cameras. Today, that's probably true everywhere. Every municipal transit system and public transportation system, buildings and so forth. Every intersection, there's going to be some cameras there. We gather all that data, but if we're only using it to monitor what's happening now and to evaluate performance today or identify problems now, in fact, it's like a rear view mirror because it shows you what just happened. It's not going to show you what's happening next. I guess the point you're making is when you gather enough of that data, you can actually start to do a fairly reliable forecast. Yeah. If you're willing to, you can generate a forecast. You could even generate different scenarios with different probabilities, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that would work. Like, what do you envision there?
Oh, well, I was going to say, to follow on to Brett's question about the most important technology, I said television. There's a television series called Person of Interest, and which, if you've never seen that, was exactly what you just described, Rob. Using surveillance technologies and AI and machine learning, and these set of characters are able to sort of get future predictions of bad things that are about to happen and try to do something about it. So we are actually, I believe, at that point where you could start to do that type of thing. But it's a great program. That's why television is so important, because we get to see these amazing visions of the future in that way.
But it's really interesting. Like, our ability to forecast this way is quite limited. And the place where humanity seems to be best at it, apart from planetary motion, which we're great at, but we can thank Kepler and Newton for that. When we have a law, we're pretty good at forecasting. But with weather, I think the weather is the farthest out that we can forecast reliably, but it's only about 7 days. And even that, like 5 days is pretty certain. The next 2 is a little bit iffy. And then the following week, it's really wildly unreliable pretty quickly. It's an interesting problem. Like, how far do you think humans can forecast if we have enough data?
Well, I love to think about not being correct in forecasting, but being more complete. I don't know that we're ever going to have, a super high level of precision with forecasting or prediction, but I do think we can cover all, the spectrum of all the different possibilities pretty well, and then let people figure out what's most likely to happen in that particular case. So I don't know that anybody can predict, more than next week, right? I mean, honestly.
Certainty. You can at a certain point, it becomes a cone of probabilities, and the cone expands because as you go further and further out, there's more possibilities introduced.
We talk a lot, with students and, and also people who are early in their careers, and they're very concerned about, the job market and being able to predict what's next. And I keep reminding them that, yes, all these technologies are amazing and they're doing all these incredible things, but humans have the advantage because we are so random, right? Honestly, we can synthesize something out of a childhood memory and what you ate for breakfast and the color of the wall behind you. In milliseconds. Like, our brains, are amazing at being able to be super creative, in ways that I don't think we've taught the machines how to do yet. So to your point about prediction, the world that we live in, and people in particular, are so completely chaotic and random. I don't know that you will ever get accurate predictions in the way that people hope to, but we can lay out all the different possibilities.
So then you can assign a probability, like a weight, to each of those possible scenarios.
But that, like, weights have been based on the past. And yet, in some cases, the past is a good predictor of the future. In some cases, it's not at all. Right. Okay. So where does it say that ChatGPT was going to show up 2.5 years ago and change the world overnight? Like, show me one story that said that was going to happen in that way. Things happen, right? And we just, as people, we're very, very good at adapting. But the whole notion that a futurist can predict the future is it's a very romantic notion.
Well, that's why we like to say we like to talk about forecasting rather than prediction on this show, just because I think it's forecasting is super forecasting is a more accurate way of, because prediction has that sort of crystal ball type.
We get teased about that from time to time. Like, where's your crystal ball if you're a futurist?
Yeah, but
Mike, let's talk about AI in the context of forecasting. So, you mentioned ChatGPT a second ago. So that's a statistical pattern matcher, right? So it's going to forecast what the most likely next word or the next pixel in an image is likely to be. So in a way, it is doing a prediction, but what it's predicting is the most likely thing for, what people would expect, what the audience might expect. It's one of the reasons why it's not so great at entertainment yet, because it gives you very predictable plots, and that's exactly the opposite of entertainment. It's great if you're doing a research paper or something about history or, regurgitating some facts that are known, but it's not necessarily so good at inventing new. In fact, some people say it can't invent anything new because it's limited. The corpus that it's been trained on is what it knows. When it goes beyond that, it begins to hallucinate, which can have its own entertainment quality, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that these LLMs could be reliable for forecast, or do you think that we're just inviting hallucination?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on that particular part of machine learning and AI, but what I've witnessed and what I know is that they will get much better at being able to help with what you talked about as forecasting, which is, let's just call it a bit more scientific in its approach. And so that clearly, because we're getting better at teaching these models how to reason or how to mimic, how the human brain works to a certain degree. And so I do believe that they're going to get better and better at helping us to be better at forecasting and being better at spotting trends and being able to possibly synthesize something that we wouldn't have come up with necessarily ourselves.
That last point is one that I'm really keenly interested in personally. A big part of my practice is blind spot coaching, helping organizations understand what they can't perceive because of their structure or their leadership or some mandate, or sometimes there's taboo topics. You're not allowed to talk about certain things in the company. Or sometimes it's regulatory. They've been conditioned not to think about something because the regulations don't permit them. And a company that's not so inhibited is going to find an open space where they can innovate around that company. And that often is how disruption occurs. Yeah. And so,
drive my job, by the way, Rob. that's what I do every day.
Oh, then we have that in common.
Like that's what I point out for companies is all those things you just talked about.
Oh, that's funny. It's almost like they put those blinkers on horses, the blinders, where they can't see too far, so they're not distracted and they can stay focused.
And
good reason, right? A company wants their team focused.
I mean, if you're talking to someone in the banking or pharmaceutical or insurance, there's regulations and laws, and there's very good reasons why they can and can't do certain things.
But over the years, you kind of get settled into that like a habit of mind, and then you just stop thinking about it. It's almost like a terra incognita. My thinking is that the AI, the current crop of chatbots, is actually quite useful for this, because you can say to it, what am I missing? What are the counter arguments? What are the opportunities I'm not addressing right now? And it'll challenge your thinking if you invite it to. It's not going to do it unless you ask. You have to have the foresight, I guess, to invite that kind of scrutiny.
But we will, like fast forwarding, these agents will start to become more proactive. They will start to, challenge is a strong word, suggest, question, and investigate with you, instead of letting you just go along doing whatever you're doing, and may actually start to interject, sort of like the future version of Clippy, right? Where it will actually start to, to ask.
I can't believe you went there.
Okay, I'm just going to go on record by saying Clippy was so far ahead of its time. You could argue about the implementation, and you can argue about, the annoyance factor, but it got right what we're doing right now. And that was so long ago. That was like in the mid 90s.
Wow. Talk about forecasting. Clippy as an avatar of the future. Who would have ever guessed that?
Telling you, Clippy's making a comeback.
Right now. That's very funny. One of the things I love to do with the chatbots is ask it to challenge my thinking. So let's say I'm putting together, often I'll be putting together a presentation or a pitch or something used to persuade, a tool used to persuade somebody to a point of view, or convey some information that I think is important for them to understand. But what I now always do, just as a routine matter, is I'll present that to the chatbot and say, okay, tell me what I missed and tell me what all the counter arguments are. Now, this ends up being a fascinating conversation that can go on for a half an hour or more. because you kind of get in the debate with the AI, and that is so useful before you go out on stage or before you go in front of a client or before you go pitch somebody else, to kind of rehearse the arguments before and against.
Yeah.
And often what you'll find is there's a gap in your argument you can fix.
What you just mentioned is what most people don't realize about the language models and the assistants is they are so incredibly deep and very very well versed, let's say, in so many different things that people never even thought about doing.
Yeah.
Like you said, give me the talking points for my next meeting when I'm meeting with a chief financial officer in terms that they will, understand and people can prepare so much better. You can get such a better outcome, and most people just don't realize it's sitting right there in front of them.
What we're doing here for films is creating a writer's room. So we cast the AIs into different roles, and we'll say, okay, you're a snarky 16-year-old, you're a sardonic 25-year-old, you're a mid-career professional, you're a mom who's caring and concerned. You give them kind of like a cliche part, and then you run the story past them and they opine, and you can actually set them against each other. This is fascinating because it unlocks some of the creativity that is inherent in those systems. So you have to kind of like shape it, give them permission, or if you will, like, as I say, cast them in a role. And in that case, you're the director, like you're the one who's telling them what to do. But it's really fun because it's like being the director of a live stage play where the actors go out and improvise in front of you. You watch the improv happen. I find this absolutely fascinating. Machines talking to machine. One thing for a human to talk to a machine, that's pretty cool. But when you have two machines talking to each other, it's sort of like, well, you can set these things against each other.
This sounds like a future version of The Office.
Yeah. It's not very visual yet, unfortunately. One of the funny things about this, though, is since you're an expert in visualization, much of what occurs in an AI, particularly the LLMs that we use now in the chatbots, is that it's invisible to us, right? We can't see the gears turning. We can't see the machine clanking away. It's invisible to us. It happens somewhere in the cloud, someplace else. A whole bunch of energy gets used up, and we just get a nicely formatted response in text. So it isn't a very visual process. And the danger there, I think, is that can lead us to kind of magical thinking. Right, you know this as a UI designer, that if you can obscure a process enough, if you can get a result, they start to formulate their own theory about how it works. And I think that's probably true. I think that's happening to some people. I'm here in Los Angeles. This week is LA Tech Week. So we have a lot of technology talks, a lot of events happening. And of course, everyone's very, very preoccupied with the advent of AI actors and synthetic performers, because that seems like it might be an existential threat to the screen actors. So that's a really big constituency here in town. And those folks, I think rightly, are very concerned about that prospect. However, they haven't gotten curious enough to figure out how these systems work. And so you'll hear them say stuff that is 100% false. For instance, you'll hear people opine that like, Tilly Norwood, this character, this controversial AI actor, they're saying, well, she's been trained on all the actresses, and that's why and it's like, no, that's not actually how it was trained. And unfortunately, you don't know enough about the technology to opine in a constructive fashion. And if you don't get curious about the thing you're threatened by, then you're going to arrive at a magical thinking or kind of a magical conclusion about what it does. And in a way, that's even more disempowering because you're conferring superpowers on the thing, and it is not. It is just a statistical pattern matcher. And actually, Shelley Palmer, who's been a guest on the show a lot, wrote a wonderful piece about Tilly Norwood, saying everything you think about her is wrong, in the sense that he said, but what is an actor? Well, an actor is someone who's very good at simulating emotion. They're very good at mimicking human emotion. They do it so well that we think it's credible. We consider that a kind of high art. And he said, now what is an art? What is an LLM? An LLM is also very good at simulating human communication. So he's like, now we have a battle of two expert systems here, two like really well-owned systems that are good at guessing what people are going to expect to see as the next likely emotion. So he saw it as a kind of smackdown, wrestling match between these two highly skilled groups. But here I'd say there's a lot of fear.
Just keep in my mind, Rob, I'm picturing the first, digital actor that makes it big wearing a t-shirt that says statistical pattern matcher.
It's true. Don't be afraid. It's just that. Well, there is I think people are right to be concerned, right? People are concerned about displacement, but I think that fear blinds them to possibility, right? So if you're worried that something's going to be taken away from you, what you're not thinking is I might gain something, right? And I think there is an exchange. no doubt, we are going to have to make some space in our lives for these machines. But at the same time, the machines are going to give us some powers or some new capabilities that we didn't previously have. I experience that every day when I use these systems. I don't experience it as loss, but I do know quite a few people who view it that way, and they're sort of stuck in that spot.
Yeah, true.
Do you find that people who come to the garage bear this kind of baggage, or are the people who come to the garage already liberated from those old fears?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of across society. You're going to have people who see this as an opportunity and a way to better themselves or learn or upskill or whatever you want to call it. And then you'll see people who just view it as a threat. I don't want to learn something new. Why does this have to change? We've always done it this way. And,
I mean, that's for 30 years, we've seen that with digital disruption and people who resist it, even when it's clearly happening.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, to wrap up the show here, would you do me a favor? Give me a forecast. Tell me what you think the world's going to look like. Just 2030. Just give me 5 years out. Tell me what you think the impact of all these technologies is likely to be in our lives.
Yeah. Nobody's going to be talking about AI the way that we're talking about it now. It'll just be the way it is. Nobody says World Wide Web anymore, right? It's just the way it is. So AI will just sort of fade into the background, but its impact will be across literally everything and in different ways, whether it's social situations, sports, business, every aspect of our lives will be highly impacted by all this technology in some way. I believe that we're headed for a time of, by necessity, a boon in entrepreneurship. People are not going to be able to get jobs. And so they're going to have to figure out how to go off and do their own solopreneur thing because that's all they have to do.
And so the cost of entrepreneurship has gone way down. Like the barriers to entry have been eliminated largely.
Yeah, and I believe in Ullman's vision of the solopreneur, making a unicorn. That will happen, and that will encourage many people to go off and try that. The question will be, what are they selling? Everything can't be digital, right? We live in a world that's needs people's pipes to get fixed and roofs to be, repaired and lawns to be mowed. And we live in a highly physical world. And so everything can't be digital, so it's going to be a lopsided economy, and it's going to be something to be dealt with, in 2030 for sure.
Right on. Well, Mike Pell, thank you very much for joining us here on The Futurists. Tell us, where can people find out more about visualizing business, and where can they learn more about Mike Pell?
I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, just Mike Pell. Visualizingbusiness.com is where you can learn about the book and my previous books, The Age of Smart Information and Envisioning Holograms, or just go to mike-pell.com.
Super. Great fun having you here today, and thanks everybody from Provoke Media for making the show possible. Big shout out to our fans. I've been getting some great stuff on social media from the listeners of the show. Thank you all for that. And I'll be back next week with another guest who is going to tell us about how they're shaping and reshaping the future that they envision. Until then, I'll see you in the future.
Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.